lecture recording. There we go. So when I came across, as I mentioned last week's lecture, when I came across a different way of looking at the world and gave me a whole different skill set, different toolkit for approaching life with instead of praying, going to church, singing, different things that are associated with Christianity, when I was given this whole other set of things, then, do I turn off the light? Oh, sorry, I could do it from here. Is that good? Okay. So this is a subject that got me interested, that set me on the path for studying Eastern religions. And so this is a subject I'm very excited to talk about every semester. So let's begin here. So some Buddhists meditate. Here in the upper left, we see a monk. He's doing walking meditation, which is another type of meditation. In the upper right, we have a very famous monk in Thailand who passed away not too long ago, living in a forest. On the bottom left, we have thousands of monks in Thailand all doing synchronous meditation together. And in the bottom right, we have a meditation center in Nova Scotia in Canada, where we have lots of non-Asians or people who are even from the diaspora community or are all studying meditation here. So you see different scenes. So some Buddhists meditate, but maybe as you've picked up already in my lectures, most Buddhists don't meditate. 99% of Buddhists don't really meditate, or they don't meditate, what we say hardcore meditating. I mean, it might make up a small part of their daily, weekly, monthly, annual Buddhist practice, but it's not something they engage in on a day-to-day basis. So we have, for example, Tiger Woods in the upper left. He is Buddhist. His mom is Thai and his dad is African-American. And when I was living in a Buddhist monastery, a Thai Buddhist monastery in California, back in 2001, he came to visit, him and his mom. And I knew slightly of him. I'm definitely not into golf now, and I was really not clued into golf back then. But everyone, all this buzz and hubbub about this, at this time he wasn't super popular, but he was semi-popular, had come. And he came to get a blessing from the monk because he wasn't winning. He wasn't doing, he kept losing some really big events, and his mom, being a devout Thai Buddhist, came to this temple and asked the monk to, bless her son, or to give him some kind of amulet or charm that he could wear that would help improve his scores, or his holes in one, I don't know, whatever golfers do, to be like a really great golfer. And you could tell Tiger was really not into it. He was just like, he was just going through the motions, but his mom was very serious. And the monk gave him some little amulet. And so, but, Tiger, nominally Buddhist, brought up in a somewhat Buddhist household. And yet I know that he doesn't meditate. Hey guys, we have some more people joining us. The upper right is a group of Thai monks who are actually champions in some online game. So these guys, I've read interviews about them. They're monks, but yet they don't do anything related to meditation. I mean, and these activities that they're doing are not a substitute for meditation. People may think, oh, it might be meditative, but it's not contemplative or meditative in the sense that we're going to be talking about today. The bottom left are a group of monks in Dharamsala, northern India, playing what looks like PlayStation 2 or something. And they also have some other video games in the area. So this was a computer center or a gaming center that they could go and pay a few dollars or whatever, per hour to play video games. And on the bottom right, we have another Vajrayana temple where rituals. So most Buddhists are engaged in ritual activity, whether that be chanting, praying, making offerings. So this makes up the bulk of Buddhist activities for both monks and non-monks. So even though we're going to be talking about meditation today, and meditation is the activity the only activity the Buddha said that you can do to get enlightenment, to get nirvana, most Buddhists don't do it. And we'll talk about why that is through the course of this lecture. But one reason is meditation for people like us, non-monks, really only became popular and accessible in the early 1900s. Before that, monks were the only ones that had access to these teachings. It's not that they were secret. esoteric. They weren't kept away from lay people like you and I, but it's just that most people didn't know the liturgical language. They couldn't read Sanskrit or Pali or, you know, classical Chinese. They didn't have access, linguistic capabilities to understand the scriptures. Not only that, but they didn't even just have the time, the leisure to sit around and meditate. And in some of the places I do my research, in small villages in Southeast Asia, for example, nothing has changed in the past 200-300 years. And I see just how difficult it is for them to just make a daily living. I mean, day in and day out, it's the same drudgery. So if they themselves barely have a minute or two of time of relaxation, one could imagine just how difficult it was even, you know, pre-modern times. So with modernization and the development of more leisure time, Buddhist meditation centers began to open up. Monks began to teach to non-monks and nuns. And not only that, but meditation also became popular as a way to combat or fight against colonial forces. We won't go into it now, but there was a belief that the Buddhist teachings and Buddhist meditation was so powerful that Buddhists, in a peaceful way, in a non-violent way, could repel the British, repel the French forces that have been invading their country. So Buddhist associations, congregations, clubs, meditation clubs began to form in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It became fashionable, and it was seen as a supernatural metaphysical way to repel foreign forces, or at least convert them. They also believed that if they meditated, they could somehow, you know, it was like soft power, that they could somehow convince or convert the British or the French or other colonial forces. So that's where we really begin to see Buddhism take off, Buddhist meditation take off in the 1900s. And here there's a chart that's found in many Western Buddhist meditation centers that tells you different ways of sitting: the full lotus, half lotus, quarter lotus, the seiza, the Burmese, and the ancient venerable chair. So we're going to be talking about this a bit more throughout this lecture as well, about the popularity, especially in the West. So some ideal purposes of meditation. Okay, we're talking about, you know, meditation we hear supposedly helps with, you know, lowering blood pressure, reducing anxiety, helping with, you know, all sorts of physical and psychological ailments in the 21st century. But really, if we look at the Buddhist scriptures, the Buddhist teachings, what did the Buddha have in mind? What was he teaching with regards to meditation? The first one, put an end to suffering, the big dukkha, the Pali Sanskrit term for suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Put an end to the causes of suffering. You know, meditation is used to put an end to all those things that cause the suffering to constantly bubble up in our lives, unceasingly, constantly. It's the mechanism, the technique that leads people to enlightenment, to gain nirvana. And what's the word they use in ancient scriptures? They don't say meditation, they use the word bhavana, which means cultivation. So they would say, go to the bottom, go to the tree. The Buddha would say, go to the tree and cultivate. Because there's no term of meditate. Meditate comes from more of a Christian kind of idea of meditate on something, a deity or God or one's connection with Jesus, for example. So it's a borrowed word from the English language, but really cultivate. So cultivate what? So cultivation is, in English, it's like what a farmer would do. They would go out and cultivate their crops. They would plant seeds, and to help the seeds grow, they would water it, allow good sunlight, keep animals and weeds away. So generally take care of it. So people, when they meditate, they cultivate good seeds. They plant seeds of goodness. And like it says here in the down a couple points, it involves the cultivation of positive qualities such as concentration, awareness, intelligence, diligence, confidence, joy, and tranquility, while keeping away the bad things: greed, hatred, anxiety, doubt, laziness, and ill will. So those are like the weeds of the brain that you have to kind of constantly uproot and keep, like, form a fence around the brain to keep those things out, and so that the positive things can cultivate. So that's what you're doing when you're meditating. You're sitting there and cultivating. So it's not wiping out your brain. It's not making it a clean slate. It's not making it blank, because that's against the very nature of the brain. You cannot stop the brain unless, you know, it's impossible until you're dead. And even then, what no one really, well, yeah, we're not gonna talk about afterlives, but the point is that it's impossible to stop the brain from going. So what do? You give it something else to concentrate on. Also, the Buddha said that through meditation, the highest wisdom of compassion and peace are also attained. So the ultimate wisdom and the ultimate love that come with nirvana. But, you know, just it's like our minds are like a monkey, a wild monkey, he said. So the monkey is, you know, unless it's trained, unless it's tamed, the monkey is very out of control. It does what it wants. It goes here, goes there. It's constantly jumping around, trying to steal things. So our brains are like that. And here's a very nice Tanka painting from Vajrayana that kind of shows in one scene the progress of a meditator. And there's some Tibetan words here, which are hard to read and I can't translate them anyway, but we don't even need the words. I can walk you through this here, this image. So here we have this little monk here, and that represents us, you know, the meditators. And here we have this little, you know, in one hand is elephant trainers and riders use them to, you know, direct the elephant, goad the elephant where it wants to go. And then you have a leash in the left hand. So this represents the meditator, the black elephant represents the mind, and the monkey represents desire, greed, lust, anger, ill will, all the stuff of the senses that keeps our mind here, there, everywhere. So right away, our mind, the elephant, is chasing after the monkey. Whatever the monkey says is good, our brain goes towards it. And us, we're following behind. Hey, hey, hey. And we continue on. And the flame represents the meditation, you know, the sitting down, the meditating, the walking meditation, whatever the meditation topic you're working with, that represents the cultivation. Eventually, your mind becomes to become purified, and that's signified by the whiteness of the top of the elephant's head. And also that the monkey's head is also becoming white. And it's slowing down. The monkey and the elephant are now kind of trotting along. They're not racing like they were at the bottom. Continuing on the path, the meditator now finally he lassos the elephant. He's got him now. And the elephant is now no longer looking at all the things that cause us to be desirous, you know, people, iPhones, money, success, good grades, whatever that may be. Now the mind is looking towards the meditator. The meditator now has some bit of control on the brain. And now the monkey also is looking back at the brain and at the meditator. So it's the monkey, represented by all the sense stuff, is losing its control. Eventually, we have you know, the continual purification of the mind and the senses. And eventually we get to a point where now you, the meditator, are in control. And the monkey is now following whatever the mind does. It's now not in charge of the mind any longer. And you continue along the path to the point where the elephant, you know, the monkey just disappears. You know, those cravings, the anger, the ignorance is now gone. And now it's just a purified mind. And now you're in control, you're leading it. And you reach a point where neither you, the meditator, nor the elephant, your brain, need to do anything. You've reached a point where you've reached the end of your goal. You can just chill. Everything is under control. It's a very serene state. This flying meditator, that's still this guy, this represents certain byproducts of Buddhist meditation. Certain byproducts are supernatural powers. So the Buddha said, yes, some meditators will reach a point where you can gain the supernatural powers of flight, walking on water, tunneling through the earth, creating, you know, a myriad manifestation of yourself, having clairvoyance, clairaudience, hearing things, knowing, reading people's minds. So here it represents the supernatural powers that may accompany a meditator. And then here just represents nirvana. You know, you're just riding this elephant. You've got the sword that slices away all ignorance. It's the sword of wisdom. And that represents the point where, you know, you've reached it. And now you can slice through anger, desire, ill will, greed, ignorance. So just in this little tanka painting, it encapsulates the entire path of a Buddhist meditator from beginning to end. So it's always nice. And you could find this, this is a very, very popular scene that's found throughout, especially in the Vajrayana world. And each Theravada and Mahayana have their own kind of versions, but this encapsulates it nice.
Professor?
So, yes, and sorry, I got a question. Let's see.
So like we can see the presentation file on the screen. So would you mind just checking?
Oh, sorry. Oh my goodness. I'm usually so good about this. This is the first thing. This is what happens. So this is the hybrid mode. I knew it. I knew this was going to happen. So I was like focusing and trying to get back. So I won't repeat the whole thing, but here's the scene. So you can, sorry about that, everybody. And thank you for, yeah, but yeah, thank you for speaking up. Next time, feel free to just say, hey, Tom, Professor Patton, doctor, whatever you want to call me. Hey, you, just go back. Okay, so that's good. Thank you. Let me just make sure I'm stopping. Sorry, we can't see. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to share screen, make sure we're on it again. We're all here. So this was the scene that I just explained. Maybe you can think about it in your way, or you have it in front of you. So continuing on. So in ancient times, remember before the Buddha became the Buddha, he was meditating. But when the Buddha eventually started teaching Buddhist meditation, there was generally a shared set of practices, of meditation techniques that were shared, roughly for about 100, 200 years after the Buddha died. But as Buddhism evolved, it broke up into different schools, sects, schisms, and went to different parts of the world. Meditation also evolved into different meditation techniques, which took into account cultural and sectarian characteristics. Some of these include, one of them, which is very popular, I'm sure you know, Zen Buddhism, which is at least very popular in North America, which is the Zen is the Japanese word, which is the pronunciation of the Chinese Chan, which is the Chinese pronunciation of the Sanskrit dhyana. So, dhyana meditation, Chan meditation, Zen meditation. In Tibet, it's Dzogchen meditation. So this literally means, the absorption, state of meditation, trance. It has a myriad definitions. But this was a form of meditation which focuses on, is highly morally found in Mahayana and Vajrayana, but it evolved in India. And then as it spread to China, Korea, up into Tibet and Japan, it took on slightly different cultural and sectarian differences. But it was really refined in places like China, Korea, and Japan. I mean, the definitions just sit. Don't think about anything. I mean, the brain is going on, but in a way, kind of watch the brain and all the thoughts that are happening, imagine them to be like passing clouds in the sky. When you look at the sky, you see the clouds they're doing their thing, moving across. Likewise, sit, and even in a very specific position. So unlike other schools of Buddhism and other meditation techniques, Zen, Chan, dhyana meditation is very specific on one's body posture. And this has all sorts of physiological, psychological benefits according to this school. And it was supposedly started by a legendary figure named Bodhidharma, who lived in Sri Lanka. He was supposedly a prince and eventually went to China to do missionary work in Buddhism. And supposedly he taught ancient Indian martial arts techniques to Chinese monks, who then eventually evolved into Shaolin Kung Fu. This is legend. Not many historians actually believe this, but this is the historical legend that the Shaolin and certain Zen schools of Buddhism perpetuate and tell, and is part of their shared legendary history. So it's very interesting, again, and it shows the transmission, the cross-cultural sharing of knowledge and wisdom and practices from Sri Lanka up into China. And whether or not it's true or not, which is probably not, but it's still interesting to see that there was this shared transmission between South and East Asia. Another form, which we talked about briefly, is Pure Land Buddhism. So this is as I talked about last week, there's many different universes. I mean, actually there's infinite universes. So Mahayana really early on while different meditators, philosophers, they came to the conclusion very early on, about 2,000 years ago, that maybe this is not the only universe. Maybe there are other universes. This was something quite radical at the time. Usually Theravada Buddhists wouldn't necessarily believe this, but Mahayana Buddhists started to create this whole new cosmological model for reality. And they began to think, okay, perhaps there's many other offshoots of this universe, other branches. This was something that was based not on scientific inquiry. They didn't have any kind of instruments where they could look up into the sky to do astronomy, but this is coming from internal meditative revelations, where they began to have these teachings and visions of other Buddhas coming to them from other dimensions. And they said, when they came out of these meditative states, they began to think about it, write down what they saw, paint what they saw, and they began to create and develop another form of Buddhism, still in Mahayana, but that posited other Buddhas in other dimensions and other universes. So our universe has Shakyamuni Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and then there's another universe that has Amitabha Buddha, and then many other universes have their own Buddhas, and they're all connected. And one can transverse and astral travel to other dimensions to meet these other Buddhas through specific arduous meditation techniques. And Pure Land Buddhism is described as calling Amitabha Buddha to mind by repeating his name over and over and over, either aloud, silently, in your mind. I forgot my Buddha prayer beads. You brought them for last week, but the beads that I had, you'd also be using those to chant Amitabha's name. So you may know him as Amitofu, Amida, Amitabha, Amida, many different pronunciations of Amitabha Buddha. So this may be done vocally or mentally, and with or without practice beads, like I said. And people will usually commit to a fixed amount. They'll say, okay, I'm going to take a vow to chant 1,000 Amitabhas today. And they believe that they're accumulating merit. They're building up a store of merit. And that just chanting it could also have this kind of, it's efficacious in the sense that it builds up merit, it may cure disease. And if on your deathbed, at the moment of death, if you have Amitabha on your brain or in your mouth, you'll instantly be transported to his realm, where you'll be reborn in one of these little lotus flowers in this heavenly realm, where you'll pop right out, and then you'll be in the presence of Amitabha Buddha, where he will teach you how to become enlightened. Because Pure Land Buddhists believe that after Shakyamuni has died 2,500 years ago, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do what the ancients did. So they have to rely on a future or a Buddha from another dimension. And some people will chant the entire Pure Land, this little mantra. A mantra is a word or a phrase or verse which is chanted over and over and over for meditative purposes, or also it's like a magical spell. I mean, this is a magical spell, a Harry Potter spell, which gives you, the wielder, magical powers to manipulate the natural and psychological world around you, of yourself and of others. So this is Buddhist magic. And they would chant this, and I've chanted it many times. It goes, Namo Amitabhaya Tathagatataya Tadyata Amritabhave Amritasambhave Amritavikante Amritavikantakamini Gagana Kirtichare Svaha. And they would do that again and again and again and again and again and again. And it would be, and this has all sorts of, and it really doesn't mean anything. It just means literally like homage to the one who has thus gone, the great Buddha, who dwells in, in Amrita, which dwells well in Amrita. So it's nothing specific. It's just more of this magical spell that has power in and of itself. So that's Pure Land Buddhism, and that is meditation. That's a meditative technique. Moving on to Tantra. Tantra is basically, this is probably the most recent development or evolution of Buddhism. This developed in 7th century India, and then moved from there into Central Asia, up into China, Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, parts of Myanmar, so Sri Lanka. So it really spread far and wide because it became very popular. It was actually trendy. It was very fashionable by the members of society in ancient India to start practicing and following Tantra. See, I have a question here. Oh, and some student asked about, Tangnik Sang asked, is some Pure Land monks chanting in hypertone? Could you tell me what hypertone is? I think I know what you mean, but I kind of want to make sure. I mean, you mean very quickly? Yes, they will chant it. If they have to get through 5,000 to 10,000 repetitions of that, they will do it very quickly. Some are very specific. Some monks say it's very specific. You need to be say it very clearly and quietly, or very, it loses its power, its potency, if it's not done correctly. But other people will just want to speed through it. So back to Tantra, this is based, so Tantra is the Buddhist idea that the universe is inhabited by some divine power, some divine entity. Hindu Tantras would believe that it's a god or goddess that is in charge of everything. And Buddhists, they would say that it's just this amorphous ethereal energy that pervades the universe. So how do we tap into that? So they developed a very systematic set of practices to harness that energy, just tap in and bring it into oneself. And they would use it with a guru, or use some of these were very famous gurus in ancient India, Tilopa, Naropa, Milarepa. And practices include chanting of mantras, breath control, visualization, looking at chakra channels, which we won't get into here, mandalas, and other sorts of ritual activity. And there's a couple videos that we'll show after the break of tantric activities. And one of them is ritual sex meditation. Now, again, most Buddhists were not going around doing this, but this was a transgressive way. Many tantric practitioners thought perhaps the Theravadins and many Mahayanas, monks and nuns, are becoming attached to such things as celibacy, non-drinking of alcohol. You know, so they thought that tantric practitioners started to say that maybe these monks were also becoming attached. Even though they were good attachments, they were still attachments. So some of these tantric Buddhists started to say, well, why don't we flip it up? Why don't we engage in the activities that the Buddha said are so dangerous? If we could use them and channel them, and you know, use the power of the orgasmic experience that happens in sexual union, and use it not for our own sexual gratification, but to somehow internally channel that power and energy. We could use it, according to Tibetan medical science at the time, channel that sexual energy into a liberating force. And there's actually very specific medical charts, so they believe that sex was actually something that could be used for health reasons, for medicinal purposes, and for leading one to actual nirvana. So, and actually the Dalai Lama recently came out, not too long ago, not too short, it was about 20 years ago. And he said, listen, yes, this is a practice of Vajrayana meditation, Vajrayana school of meditation of Buddhism. However, I don't want any of you monks abusing this. I want you monks, if you decide to engage in this practice, I want you to leave the monkhood. You can engage in it if you want and practice it, but I would ask you to please not become a monk anymore. So this is, and it was very popular in America in the 1960s, 50s, 60s, during the countercultural movements and stuff. Yeah, Angelina?
How is it fair if it is considered to be a practice? Why would you ask them to leave?
Good question. So the question was, if this was a practice, why did the Dalai Lama ask them to leave? Partly for social pressure, the idea that a monk should be celibate. So even though this was a reaction against the monastic movement, as Buddhism began to grow and take hold, especially in the West, many Westerners began to have the idea that monks needed to be celibate. And the Dalai Lama said, okay, yes, in order to continue the idea that to keep Buddhism clean, essentially. But this also goes into power abuse of power. So what was happening, the Dalai Lama actually came out after a lot of scandals started happening in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even up till last year. I mean, you could just see the image here. The power structure has the male, who is the central figure, the larger figure, and the female is the accompaniment. And so this was very much still the case. Male monks in power would abuse the system by, choosing women. Maybe that was against their will, or they would say, listen, you'll get a lot of merit if you engage in this sexual ritual activity with me. And so once they started, I mean, that was going on for centuries. And then once it got transplanted to Europe and America, many people began to be like, wow, this is, okay, yeah, it's cultural, but there's still this abuse going on. So it was interpreted as, in certain instances, there was this, these monks were taking advantage of female practitioners without their knowledge.
Well, I think that's on the monks, it's not on the practice.
Oh, so these were all monks.
No, I'm saying
Uh-huh.
like it's their fault. It's sort of like it's like a human mistake.
Right, so they would, exactly, so they would say it's a human, so to keep away, to make sure that none of these human mistakes happened anymore, the Dalai Lama came out with a strict rule, said, listen, okay, yes, I recognize this is a practice, but it's causing a lot more harm than what it's supposed to do. So he came out.
It's very famous at like certain groups in North America.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, it's still very, very popular among certain groups in North America, as Angelina said. Let's see, we got another. So this is different from Japanese Buddhism monks. Yes, so this is different from Japanese Buddhism monks practice sexual. So this refers to Japanese monks were forced by the Japanese emperor and powers that be in the 1800s to forcefully get married. So that's why Japanese monks are allowed, and some Korean monks are allowed to get married and have families, because there was an anti-Buddhist sentiment amongst Japanese reformers and modernists in the late 1800s, and they saw Buddhism as a backwards religion. It was a religion that was taking advantage of tax benefits, not being taxed, paying their taxes. They were amassing large amounts of valuable land, buildable land, arable land. And so the Japanese and Korean governments at that time said, listen, you're creating these huge dynasties, so we're going to force you to get married, have kids, in the hopes that it would water down or eventually dissolve Buddhism. And it did to an extent. But so the Japanese Buddhists monks getting married is different than these ritual acts of Buddhist sexual union. So other meditation techniques include, like I said, recitation of mantras, magical spells, words. You can say Buddha, 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 pen, pen, pen. I mean, literally, it depends, thermos, 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 any kind of word that can function as an anchor to the brain to keep it one-pointed. So mantra recitation, focusing on the breath, either the breath going in and out of your nose, your diaphragm, your mouth, the breath energy flowing through your body. Visualization practices, visualizing another Buddhist deity, Amitabha Buddha, involving all sorts of different specific visualization practices that are taught by gurus in the tantric tradition. Loving kindness, it's a love about revolving around compassion, equanimity. It's a non-sexual love. It's a love that one would have towards a family figure. So the Buddha would say, develop thoughts of loving kindness for a stranger or even your enemy as you would for your own parent. So this was a very specific practice. And also recollecting Buddhist facts of life, that we're all going to die. Everything is impermanent. This is all everything we're doing right now is a big illusion. It's just a dream. What's the point? There's no self. It's kind of pessimistic, but the Buddha's saying there's a freedom in that if we recognize that this is all going to end. I may walk out of this room, cross the street, and get hit by a minibus. It could happen. Nobody knows. And the Buddha actually says one thing you can do is wake up in the morning and be like, today's the day I might die. Well, I better make the most of it. This is all impermanent. At any moment I could lose my job, I could lose my family. So, it sounds really depressing, but there's a freedom in that. It allows to loosen up one's attachment to all these things that you think are important. And there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of other meditation techniques. So meditation we're talking about in this very short lecture actually encompasses something that we could talk about for an entire year. I mean, it's just a multitude of techniques that serve all different purposes. But having said all of that, all Buddhist meditation can be, fall under one of two categories. So even if you have 1,000 of them, they're all can be, categorized into one of two. One of them is concentration meditation, which is samatha, shamatha, and this is about more of calming meditation, of penetrating deeper levels of consciousness through inward examination, making your mind like a laser beam, have it one pointed laser-like focus. And then the second one is insight, vipassana meditation. And this is more of an opening up, an analytical form of meditation, placing attention on different states of the body, physical sensations, mental states. So it's so concentration is a calming, one-pointed, whereas vipassana is a more open-ended, analytical frame of meditation. They can be practiced one at a time. They can't do simultaneous, but one could do concentration for a bit and then move on to the second one, vice versa. So there's many different ways of tackling these. So let's look at just this brief video here. So this here is a monk named Mingyur Rinpoche. He's from the Vajrayana tradition, but he's teaching a meditation technique here, which is non-sectarian in the sense that it's a form of samatha and vipassana meditation, which is found in all three schools of Buddhism. And we're not going to watch the whole 14 minutes. We'll just watch 2 or 3 minutes of it. But he's one of the most popular meditation teachers around today. He comes to Hong Kong often, and he's quite well known. And he gives, his teachings are very simple, down to earth, and that's one reason why he's probably been very popular lately.
Perfect. Perfect. Just keep still. And please close your eyes.
And I love his accent. That's why I love it.
Close your eyes like
You're sleeping.
that's it. You don't have to close too tight. And special. And then relax your muscles in your body. Relax muscles in your hand, forehead, face, ear, cheeks, nose, upper body, arms and hands, lower body, and the legs and feet. Just totally relaxed. Yet, spine stretch. And little bit bend your neck forward. Little bit. It's almost like
Little bit. So you'll fall asleep if you keep listening to him. He's just there's something so calming about him. I listened to him, many, many years ago, I had an interview in Australia and I was so jet lagged and I was just listening to him and I fell asleep. They had to wake me up and then they brought me in and I was just like, I didn't get the job probably because they're like, why is this guy Tom totally out of it? I just went in totally relaxed. It was so peaceful. So, he's 14 minutes. He gives you a guided step-by-step process through a very simple meditation technique. So if you're interested, this is as good as any of a good introduction. And I like to vet teachers. I'm cynical when it comes to teachers. I want to make sure that so I do my homework to make sure that a teacher is a good representative of their community. And so this, in other words, I don't like to find anybody who abuses their position in the Buddhist world. And so this guy I would say is pretty, good. He gets my star of approval for what it's worth. So he's a very good teacher these days. I'm not trying to convert you. I'm just saying many students ask, what's a good way to start? Who is good to follow? There are so many out there. Who do I start with? There's so many quacks and crazies. And so what I would say is this guy is as good as any to start. So we'll just watch 2 short videos, then we'll take a break. So this is another, I just was trying to find some videos that kind of do a better job than I do of explaining meditation. And these videos do, I mean, even if they're cartoon forms, they also do a good job of explaining meditation succinctly and clearly.
Someone answered your question on hypertone sleep.
Oh, great. Yeah, I saw that. I was going to get, yeah, thank you. So this person who talked about hypertone, I saw that. I'm going to get to it right after these 2 videos.
Despite what you may have heard, meditation does not involve joining a group, paying any fees, wearing any special outfits, sitting in a funny position, or believing in anything in particular. It is simple, secular, scientifically validated exercise for your brain. You don't have to do it yet, but just so you know, here are the 3 steps. 1, sit with your back straight and your eyes closed. 2, notice the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Pick a spot where it's most prominent. Usually that's your nose or your chest or your belly. And just focus your full attention on the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. And as soon as you try to do this, your mind's going to go nuts. You're going to start thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch? Why did I say that dumb thing to my boss? Your brain's going to go nuts, and that's fine. The whole game is to notice when you've gotten lost and to start over. And then to start over again and again and again. Every time you do that, it's like a bicep curl for your brain, and it shows up on the brain scans. Scientists have found this in the lab. It's also, by the way, a radical act. You're breaking a lifetime's habit of walking around in a fog of projection and rumination, and you're actually focusing on what's happening right now. Meditation is unlike anything you do in the rest of your life. Failure is actually success. As I said, the whole game is just trying, failing, starting again, failing, starting again. Here's my advice. You should be meditating every day, 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's it. This doesn't require some giant investment. I don't care how busy you are. You have 5 to 10 minutes to give this a shot. I guarantee you it will make a big difference.
So if you don't take it from me, take it from these talking mice, because they know. And one more before we take a break. This is also...
Training the mind is often quite different to how
Sorry,
people imagine
very
it
loud.
to be. Maybe they have an idea.
You have this app?
Stopping thoughts
This is a good app.
or eliminating feelings. But the reality is a bit different. An easy way to think of it is to imagine yourself sitting on the side of a busy road, the passing cars representing the thoughts and the feelings. All you have to do is to sit there and watch the cars. Sounds easy, right? But what usually happens is that we feel a bit unsettled by the movement of the traffic. And so we run out into the road and try and stop the cars, or maybe even chase after a few, forgetting that the idea is to just sit here. And of course, all of this running around only adds to the feeling of restlessness in the mind. So training the mind is about changing our relationship with the passing thoughts and feelings, learning how to view them with a little more perspective. And when we do this, we naturally find a place of calm. But we sometimes forget the idea of the exercise and become distracted. Of course we will. But as soon as we remember, here we are, back on the side of the road again, just watching the traffic go by, perfectly at ease in both body and mind.
I also have that app, Headspace. So, yeah, so before we break for a 10-minute break, use the next 10 minutes, even if just 1 minute, set your timer on your watch or something, just 1 minute, and just sit. Some people in the audience here or in the classroom are like, no, I'm not gonna do it. But just sit, just try it. Just be like, okay, I'm gonna focus on my breath for 1 minute, or I'm just gonna watch all the thoughts of my brain go by like a cloud, or I'm just gonna, just focus on something. And whenever your brain goes off, which it will, just bring it right back to that meditation object, just to see how actually difficult it is. It's not easy. It's actually quite difficult. These videos make it seem like it's very easy. So let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back. I was going to have us do some meditation here, but it's not because of the hybrid mode. It won't work so well. It's just because normally when I teach this, I would have us spend 5 to 10 minutes sitting in the classroom together, doing some meditation, experimenting with this and that. But with the hybrid mode, it's just sorry.
Every class or just this?
Just this lecture for this when I teach this every year. I know my old professor, when he taught Buddhist studies, he would have us do 5 minutes meditation at the beginning of each class. And some teachers would actually have us, one teacher actually tried to get us to devote to an ethical living like a Buddhist for a week, which meaning no drugs, no alcohol, no. Some people are saying not an option here. But no, so try to live as a hardcore Buddhist would live for even for 24 hours or a week. So some of us signed up for that many years ago. We gave it a try. And there's many meditation centers here in Hong Kong, which you can go and stay for a day to 10 days to really experience the life of a monk or a nun. It's really great. It's 10 days, anywhere from, some of them are usually silent. So it's 7 days of no talking. No, but it's like this. So what I'm going to show you now is a video, a day in the life of a Buddhist monk. And this place I actually visited and spent some time at, but there are many places throughout the world and here in Hong Kong that offer these kinds of places. You'll see, when you watch this, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So this is a Western monk who just went to Thailand, ordained as a monk, and then came back to his home in the UK, where he now lives in this Buddhist center, this Buddhist temple, which is supported by British and British Thai members of the Thai diaspora community. So he does an excellent job of explaining much of what I'm trying to do. And he even talks about a lot of the different aspects of the robe that you need to wear, why they wear it, how they wear it, why they shave their heads. And plus he speaks in a very eloquent British accent. So right away, he's already halfway there for me. As an American, anybody who speaks in a British accent is automatically considered smarter than me, so.
My name is Renato Bhikkhu, and I am a Buddhist monk. A bhikkhu is a fully ordained Buddhist monk. The word literally means one who depends on alms, not these kinds of alms, but alms as in gifts of food. Typical day will begin at 5:30. So a big bell would be rung at 5:30. Everybody gets up. And then at 6 a.m. there is what we call morning puja. And that is an hour of chanting followed by meditation. Buddhist meditation is a combination of samatha and vipassana.
Professor,
Oh, did I mess up again? Oh, this is so bad. Usually, you guys know me. I'm not this bad. I'm not this much of a horrible troglodyte when it comes to, I'm just going to blame it on the hybrid. But thank you. You said something. Okay, let's back up 30 seconds. Oh, man. Okay, here we go. I'll just back it up 30 seconds. You didn't miss much. Believe me, it's just a bald guy getting out of bed.
Everybody gets up. And then at 6 a.m. there is what we call morning puja. And that is an hour of chanting followed by meditation. Buddhist meditation is a combination of samatha and vipassana. Samatha means calming, stilling the mind, making it peaceful, and most importantly, clear. Vipassana means insight, and this is the goal of Buddhism. So we're developing a concentrated mind that is able to see things clearly and then let go. Then at 7:30 we have chores, and he's gone for an hour. An important part of the monastic discipline is looking after the place in which you live. We usually find monasteries to be very clean and well kept.
I don't know, just seeing him vacuum is just such, he's just doing such this mundane thing.
At 8:30, I will have a period of personal time. Enlightenment is when we fully understand the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is that this ordinary life of ours involves suffering. The second noble truth is that our suffering is caused by our craving and our desire. The third noble truth is that this suffering can be ended by letting go of craving. And the fourth noble truth is the Noble Eightfold Path, Buddha's teachings which lead to the ending of suffering. Then at 11, we eat our one meal of the day. And we have to eat that before 12. And that is ceremony. So we monks have to formally receive the food. So we don't just go and help ourselves, it's all given to us. I've been a Buddhist monk for almost 17 years, and I haven't had any money during that time, not even a penny. So that means we are completely dependent upon the generosity of others. As a monk, being dependent on what people give to me, I am grateful for whatever food is offered. However, I choose to be a vegetarian. A central teaching in Buddhism is compassion, wishing all living beings to be free of suffering. In the process of producing meat, there is obviously an enormous amount of suffering in the animal world. So we want to help animals by stopping eating meat. As a Buddhist monk, I don't have many possessions. There are 8 basic requisites which we are supposed to have, which includes 3 robes, there is the alms bowl, there is a water filter, a razor, a belt, and a needle and thread. Buddhist monks' robes are usually yellow or orange or brown. And in ancient India, yellow was the colour of renunciation. The word renunciation means to leave behind. So when we wear this yellow robe, it's the same colour as a leaf that's about to fall from a tree. It signifies that we have left behind the so-called ordinary life, the rat race. So we leave behind our money, our wealth, family and relationships. We also leave behind our hair and our normal clothes. I shave my head for the same reason that I wear the robe. So it's another symbol of renunciation. Hair is often closely connected with vanity. People spend an awful lot of time on their hair and their appearance. By shaving off our hair, we're saying that physical appearance and beauty are not important when it comes to pursuit of real happiness. On the day that I became a novice monk, I was given the name Manapo. Manapo is a Pali word, so Pali is the language of the ancient Buddhist texts. It means the likeable one. So whether my teacher found me likeable or whether it's something I need to work on, I'm not so sure. During the late afternoon, we have time to ourselves, and it will be similar to the morning period. So walking meditation, sitting meditation, perhaps some private study, reading Buddhist texts. Walking meditation is very similar to sitting meditation in that we focus on just one thing. So we have a number of paths, a number of walking paths around the monastery. They're just straight paths, and we walk back and forth. And as we walk, we focus very carefully on the soles of our feet touching the ground. As a bhikkhu, I am not married, I don't have a girlfriend or a partner, and I am not allowed to get married. So at 8 p.m. we have evening puja, which is more or less the same as morning puja. The chanting's a little bit different. After evening puja, we have personal time again, and then I go to bed usually between 11 and 12. So as a monk, I don't get as much sleep as most people. I do get more than what the Buddha actually recommended. He recommended 4 hours. And the reason why we don't need to sleep as much is because meditation practice in part fulfills the function of sleeping and dreaming, because it can be a very restful activity. The thing I find most rewarding about being a bhikkhu is that it gives my life a purpose. One of the most difficult things I've found about life before was the sense that it had no purpose. I realised that I'd been born, I was going to live a bit, and then I was going to die. What's the point in that? But as a monk, I've given my life a purpose, and that purpose is to reach enlightenment, which means to free my mind from all greed, hatred, and delusion. I might be some way off, but at least I have a purpose.
We could also watch Gordon Ramsay attempts to meditate with a Buddhist monk. He gets very angry, as you can imagine. He can't sit still. I already watched it. But anyway, so these places, these meditation centers, many of them are open to give people a chance to experience what it would be like to live 24 hours, 24 days, 24 years as a monk or a nun. So here in Hong Kong, they have them. They're usually, no electronics allowed. So it's actually like I think Angelina here in the classroom was saying something like a cleanse. It almost is. It really is like a mental recharge, a cleansing of the brain, because it's just going throughout our day is just, we're bombarded by so many things, and it just causes us in a constant state of agitation and frenetic energy. But once you go into one of these places for even, a weekend, usually they're about 10 days, 7 to 10 days. I know the one here in Hong Kong has 7 to 10 days. And it's usually silent, so you don't speak for 7 to 10 days. You have a rigid schedule of meditating for 45 minutes, walking meditation for 45 minutes, a break for 30 minutes. And it's just constantly that over and over and over. And then you eat, and everything you do is very slow. It's deliberately slow. Eating slow, walking slow, and you don't have to worry about talking to anybody. And you also can't use your phone, so you're not constantly waiting. And it's difficult because it is a detox in a way. Your first couple 2 or 3 days, you're jonesing for your phone. You're shaking, and I see people, even myself, after all these years, you tend to want to constantly see what's been retweeted, what's been posted. Is this person needing to hold me? And you find out after 10 days that nothing was important. If it was really important, they would get back to you. And then you realize, wow. And then usually what happens is you feel just so light. You're just like, wow, I didn't need to constantly check those tweets. I didn't need to constantly check Facebook status or upload or Instagram. And you're just like, wow, that wasn't important. And usually what happens is after a few weeks, everything comes back to normal again, or not normal, but everything gets crazier again. But it is a period that allows you to live a much more simplistic lifestyle, which is yeah, and it just physically, it's good for your being. You sleep more, you get, there's nothing expected of you except for just detoxing mentally and physically. So it is a really nice experience, which I've done dozens and dozens of times over the years, both here in Hong Kong, in America, Europe, Asia, throughout. Now it's more difficult for me because I have kids, and I did it earlier when my kids were younger, and my wife was not too happy. She's like, I was like, it's all for meditation, honey. I'm a much better person if I come back. She's like, I don't believe you. I bet you're just out partying or like playing video games with your friends or something. I said, no, I really am. So if any of you want more information, please let me know. I'm happy to share some. It's just plus when you're young, it's just a great experience to try it. I mean, it's so difficult to have these opportunities once you start working 9 to 5 or 9 to 12. I mean, Hong Kong hours, 12-hour days. So it's really a gift to give yourself for a few hours or a few days. So that's pretty much what you can expect, like a day in the life of a Buddhist monk is what you would do. You don't have to shave your head. Everything's the same. You wear the same clothes. Continuing on here. This one, I will share the screen now. I won't forget. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the 2 types of meditation again. He talked about it in the video, but I'll just recap a few things that he didn't talk about. And samatha meditation, the idea is to focus the mind on something like the breath, a word, a phrase, an image, so that the brain doesn't get distracted and sidetracked. It's to keep it on track. Gradually, over the course of, minutes, hours, however long you're doing this, weeks, months, years, thoughts gradually slow down. You become less distracted, and the mind, it's kind of like I wrote here, it's compared to a glass of muddy water. So let's say you take a clear glass, fill it full of dirt, and shake it up. It's just a mess. It's dirty. There's all this stuff floating around. And if you put it down, after the course of a few minutes, it will start to settle. And it will become clearer. It won't be crystal clear, but it will be clearer. And that's the same thing as samatha meditation. It's like our brains are just a swirl of muddy gunk right now, even though we think we're pretty calm or cool, but really when you sit down, you just see it's a whirlwind of stuff swirling around. And if you stop for a few minutes, even just a minute, things start to settle until you get up and then things get shaken up again. But so samatha is like this. Thoughts and emotions gradually settle and the mind becomes more clear and undisturbed. Advanced samatha, so if you remember back to that Thangka painting I showed you at the beginning of class about the flying monk, that I said one of the byproducts of meditation, supposedly for some people, is gaining supernatural powers. And I'm not gonna lie, that's one of the reasons I started. When I was a teenager, I said, what? I could become like an X-Man or an Avenger. Like if I just do some meditation, I can get these supernatural powers. And these include, clairvoyance, being able to see things that are unseeable by other people, being able to hear things far away, being able to read the minds of other people, remembering yours and others' previous lives and future lives. But the Buddha says it's very important to remember that these do not help with nirvana. In some cases, they may be a deterrence. They'll keep you off the track. You'll become so attached to these magical powers that you won't focus on the ultimate goal, which is nirvana. But some of these magical powers, of course, I'm always searching for magic monks. I mean, that's my research. I've researched wizards, magic monks. That's my thing. I travel around Asia hunting down wizards and magicians and shamans and witches and warlocks. And I've never really found anybody. But here's an image that was taken in around the height of the Vietnam War by a New York Times photographer who was there. And he saw at a protest a bunch of Buddhist monks gathering. One monk sat down and began to meditate. And his fellow monks doused him in gasoline and then set him on fire. And the New York Times photographer and writer were shocked that this monk continued to stay absolutely still, didn't scream out, didn't shout, wasn't trying to get anybody to put the fire out. Other monks have tried that, self-immolation. So this is a protest which has been also practiced by monks in Tibet and other regions that have tried to bring attention to the plight of people suffering in those areas. But what usually happens is the monks don't have sufficient concentration to withstand the horrible pain of their melting flesh. And so what usually happens is they jump up, start shrieking, begging for somebody to put out the fire. But this monk remained in this position until his body crumbled away. And there's one meditation teacher I had, he told a really interesting story, and I tell this, I don't know how much I believe in it, but this gentleman really has no reason to lie. He's actually a monk, and so one of the rules that he has to follow is not lying. I mean, that's one of the, it's not a sin, but it's considered some negative points on his karmic scale if he lies. But he told me that there was, when he was living in the jungle in Thailand with his teacher, there was, he was a young monk at the time, and there was this elderly monk who was meditating in a mountain jungle area, very far from, a city, but there was a village at the base of the mountain. And he was meditating, and what happened is he started to have this intense abdominal pain, so much so that they had to go down to the village and call the pretty much the medical clinic kid, basically, who was like just the cure-all of all people. He was just somebody that knew some basic medicine. And he came up to the mountaintop, and he noticed, he believed the monk was suffering from appendicitis. His appendix was about to burst, and they needed to get him medical attention immediately or he was going to die. But there's no, I mean, this was 1970s. There was no, they couldn't heliport him out. There were miles and miles, hours away from the nearest medical facility. So the monk said, I want you to perform the surgery. And the kid was like, what? He's like, I have the tools and I can sterilize them, but I have no anesthesia. I mean, you're going to be in so much pain. He said, don't you worry about that. You just do your job. And so, of course, the young monk, the young man about to do surgery on a venerable monk. I mean, you kill a monk, that's like the ultimate sin. You go to hell. And so he's like, oh God. He's like, let me give you something, monk. I mean, something to numb the pain. Alcohol. Let me just give you some alcohol. He's like, nope. The monk said, I can't drink alcohol. That's one of the rules I'm not allowed to do. And so he's like, okay. So he said, let me just, give me a moment. I'm going to enter into an extreme state of samatha meditation. And he just, whatever he did, he just went into this very, very deep, dormant, trance-like state. And the young man did the surgery. And then a few hours later, the monk came out of it. And they're like, how do you feel? How do you feel? And the monk said, everything was okay, but you were a little heavy-handed at certain points during the surgery with his, the pressure he was putting. So again, it sounds really far-fetched, but again, I don't know how, I hear stories about like this throughout the Buddhist world, about monks and nuns and people doing supernatural things with relation to meditation. So I imagine there's certain things that you can do with the brain to shut off certain sensory receptors, which just happen to be byproducts of intense meditation. And we'll look into some of these things when we look at the next part of the lecture on science and meditation. So that's just something interesting that I've always found fascinating. But moving on to Vipassana meditation, this is really specific to Buddhism. This was the Buddha's innovation on meditation. Samatha, shamatha, however you want to pronounce it, was already in the world in ancient India. People were meditating, using these techniques for thousands of years. The Buddha comes along and innovates. He says, okay, this concentration meditation gets me to a point, but really I still haven't, it only suppresses or removes the suffering for a certain period of time before it comes back again. So he, with his own ingenuity, developed a second type of meditation, which is Vipassana, Vipassana, different pronunciations. And this is more analytic in that it allows you to see the forces of reality working on you so that you can kind of pick them apart and analyze them to see, the ultimate reality, which is happening around us. So it uses intelligence and powers of observation to bring a meditator to a deeper level of understanding. And it cultivates a type of understanding that's not directly perceptible with our, five senses? Taste, smell, yeah, five senses. And so meditators, they really train their minds to see insight into the true nature of reality. I mean, what that is, we don't know until you actually get there. But you begin to see the inner workings of impermanence, the inner workings of how everything is just very unsatisfactory. There's no self. In Theravada, they talk about this as the 3 marks of existence. Everything is death, unsatisfactory, and no self. Whereas in the Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions, they talk more of emptiness. Their emphasis, everything is empty. There's no core in anything here. I mean, when you think there's a core, but when you start picking apart the atoms and you start picking about the atoms of the atoms and the atoms of the atoms of the atoms, you get down to the quark level, then there's nothing. It all disappears. So they were, not that they were looking at it at an atomic, subatomic level back 2,000 years ago, but they were possibly onto something in their philosophical analyses of reality. Other Mahayana traditions say that, okay, there is no self, but we have a Buddha nature. We're already Buddhas right now. We're just deluded. We just need to wake up. So certain meditation techniques allow people to kind of wake up and realize, oh, I've been the Buddha all along. The Theravada tradition, for example, would not agree with that. They would say it's a slow process that takes many, many years, if not lifetimes, to develop the skills to become a Buddha. Whereas many Mahayana traditions would say, nope, we were born with a beautiful diamond of Buddha-ness inside of us, and it's just due to karma and previous lives and habitual negative ways of thinking, which have kind of shrouded it in dirt. And meditation is a way to kind of polish that gem. And when it's completely polished, it just explodes within us, and we just naturally see reality as like a Buddha, and we become a self-aware Buddha. So those are different ways of using meditation to get to these goals. So Theravada has their goal, Vajrayana has their goal, the Mahayana has their goal. Ultimately, it's all nirvana, but they all have their own techniques or understandings of how one gets to that end goal. And these, I'm not going to read through these, but this is from the reading. Just a nice, he's got 3 or 4 paragraphs on Vipassana, which I thought were really good. And so that's just from the intro book that you're reading. But just to give you a small example of the difference between the two, using something that we all experience on a daily basis, perhaps, is anger. Let's say somebody annoys you and you get angry, that feeling of angry. You may start to feel hot, that constant rumination of what that person said or did. You just can't let it go. And your body gets tense, your blood pressure rises, your heart starts to quicken. So if you're going to apply samatha technique to that, you would focus, let's say, on an object, the breath. So anytime you started to feel anger, the thoughts, you would immediately cut that and move right to the object. And again and again and again, you'd think of the anger again, and then you just bring your thoughts back to, your attention back to the breath, or a word, or a movement, something, an image, to short circuit the constant rumination of that anger. And eventually, the anger won't go, it will subside. The root of that anger won't disappear, but at least you have reoriented your attention away from that negative trait, that weed in your brain. And then you've anchored your attention on something more wholesome for the time being. And then from there, you can then hopefully go about your day in a state that's not informed or influenced by anger, which then could lead you all down to all sorts of negative and karmically negative things. Vipassana, on the other hand, you look at anger, the anger arises, and you say, okay, anger, what does it feel like? No, really, like turn it in, like instead of like just really turn anger in on it in yourself and be like, okay, what is anger? Is it a thought? Is it a feeling? Where is it? Where do I feel it in my body? Where's the physical sensation? Okay, can I hold on to the anger? Can I manipulate it? Can I call it up whenever I want? And the more you analyze it and just look really into the anger, you start to see that it kind of, at first you thought it was a core, it was something substantial, but then it starts to melt away and it kind of takes on a gas-like ethereal form. And then you begin to explore the anger and where that comes from and does it make a difference? And then you can do all sorts of analytical stuff with regards to that thought, emotion, or feeling of anger. So those are the two differences. And you can do that, you can think of all sorts of different ways of, whether that's desire, ignorance, even happiness, even the good things that happen. You have to remember, the Buddha would say, okay, even happiness, if we're going to look at it the Vipassana way, this happiness is wonderful. Oh, it's great. I got what I finally wanted. Oh, I'm so happy and relaxed. But using Vipassana, you would have to remind yourself, this is impermanent. This will not last, and a bad thing will come along, and that too is impermanent. And this good thing is fleeting. It resides nowhere specifically in a core of my body. There's no self. And ultimately, this happy moment can cause suffering if I hold on to it and don't just let it go. If you constantly try to keep chasing after that happy, waiting for the next happy fix. So this is just, I wanted to give you, you know, something angry and something happy, and how you would look at those through the lenses of Vipassana or Samatha. Kind of, can be kind of depressing, but there's a, like I said before, there's a freedom, there's a liberation in seeing the inner workings of things that we take so for granted, that seem to be so substantial in our lives. There's a couple, I just want to show, there's these two really interesting videos, but I just wanted to show you one because they're quite long, but if you wanted to look at them in more detail later, you can. But they are just a day in the life of a Buddhist meditation center.
The abbot, the Venerable Ajahn Chah, has been in Rhodes for 50 years. Here in the forest, you can learn to be in harmony with the way things are in nature. You can live happily and peacefully. Here, a monk is able to contemplate the nature of things. As he looks around him, he understands that all forms of life degenerate and eventually die. Nothing that exists is permanent. And when he understands this, he begins to become calm and serene. These monks in northeast Thailand are on Bindabat, the daily dawn walk to receive their food offered by the villagers. Not all monks in Thailand keep strictly to the discipline prescribed by the Buddha, but these monks strive to maintain the original forest tradition of a pure and simple life. They're not allowed to possess money nor grow their own food. This ensures their total dependence on the lay community, so they can't cut themselves off in a spiritual cocoon. For the laity, Bindabat is a way of paying respect to the discipline of the monks, and also a way of making merit, which many believe brings good fortune in this life and in future rebirths. About 50 monks and novices live at Wat Pha Pong, ranging from 13 years old to 70. Some may stay for many years, but the majority will only spend a year or two, for it's the Thai custom for men to be ordained for a short period of their lives. After returning from Bindabat, the monks eat their only meal of the day, which consists mainly of rice and vegetables. The day began at 3 a.m. with chanting, meditation, general chores and duties. It's now about 8:30. Until this time tomorrow, they'll consume only liquids. After the meal, they bow to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
So I've spent some time here at this meditation center, this temple, and the head monk passed away. This was filmed in the 1980s, but the head monk disappeared, or sorry, disappeared. He died quite a long time ago. But one thing that was interesting about this place was the head monk had an actual skeleton hanging next to the Buddha altar. And that was a constant reminder that we also will become like that one day. So whenever any of us was feeling homesick or, you know, thinking about something that we really missed back home, the head monk would always say, hey, remember that you're here to do a job, and that's to meditate and to get enlightenment, hopefully. He goes, otherwise you got that to look forward to. So hopefully that will get you, you know, spurred up to do what you're supposed to be doing here and not be be so longing for other things. Another time we were meditating in one of the temples, and we would only get 1 meal a day, sometimes 2 meals a day, depending on what people would offer. And one day we knew we were getting ice cream. Somebody was going to donate ice cream, and just to have ice cream in the middle of nowhere in, a tropical environment, and to have somebody bring it in is just, that's all you could think about. Everyone was talking about the ice cream and what flavors is going to be. And I heard there's going to be durian and there's going to be strawberry and vanilla and chocolate, and all the monks, we were all chatting, and we were just this frenzy about ice cream, because that's, you're in a temple, there's nothing else to get excited about. And so we got it, and then they were serving it. They even had little ice cold, pre-chilled metal cups, bowls. And then you put it in the steam, like the steam of the ice cold ice cream was emanating, and we're just, oh, this is wonderful. And we're so excited, but we can't do anything until the head monk tells us we can start. And he decides to give a sermon. He's going on and on, talking. It's getting hot. Our ice cream is melting. Black flies are starting to circle around it and land on it. And the anger that we all felt towards the head monk for not allowing us to dig in and eat our ice cream. We were so furious. And then after about 25 minutes, he said, okay, now you may eat. And by that time, it was just a sticky puddle of warm goo. And we knew what he was doing. He was teaching us a lesson about overcoming our attachments to even something as delightful as ice cold ice cream. And so I wish he could have done it in a different way, but he was trying to teach us a very important lesson. That's something that stuck with me throughout all these years. The anger that I felt coupled with that was an interesting teaching about, yes, I wasn't even aware of the intense desire I had towards that one little scoop of strawberry ice cream. So now let's look for the last, normally this lecture goes for a full 3 hours, but I'm trying to race through it because people are dropping off like flies at this hour. It's lunchtime. Either you had lunch and you're sleeping, or you haven't had lunch and you're just waiting to get through this lecture. So I'll try to get through this quickly. Okay. How did Buddhist meditation become so popular? It's a worldwide phenomenon now. And so much so that Myanmar, the country of Myanmar, they give meditation visas. So they don't have research visas. They now have tourist visas, and they now have business visas, but throughout the 1970s, 80s, 90s, they were a hermit nation, but they did allow, the only visa they would give to foreigners was a meditation visa. And that was one way to attract good, quote unquote, good tourists to the country, and ones that would, not prowl around. It was a dictatorship, a military dictatorship ruled by a junta. And so they wanted to import tourists that would, just stay in the monasteries and meditate. But they also realized that they had something good to offer in this Buddhist meditation. And so they offered people like myself meditation visas. But Buddhist meditation really took off in the 1990s and even now to the 2000s. I mean, now this is going to be heavily centered in from Western news sources and Western science, but this is equally true here in Asia as well. It's just most of the resources I've gotten are in English. But basically, it's hot, like I said. Yes. Oh, sure, share screen, thanks. Sorry, buddy, I didn't share screen. Toby just reminded me. There we go. So, New York Times does a piece on it, Anderson Cooper, Scientific American, Time magazine, they're all talking about mindfulness meditation, what's so big about it? So basically the history in a nutshell is in the 1960s and 70s as part of the countercultural, what do you want to call it, the hippie movement in North America and Europe. A lot of Americans, Canadians, Europeans, Central and South Americans began to go to Asia to engage in all sorts of things like Peace Corps, anti-war movements, and even some soldiers who were taking part in the Vietnam War began to spend more and more time in Asia. And when they were there, they began to come across different religious traditions and practices that were completely different from the Jewish and Christian religious traditions that they grew up with. And a lot of them decide to stick around, become monks or lay disciples of a lot of these meditation teachers, and take these teachings back with them to an audience in America that they believed was primed and ready for these teachings, which they really were. It was a whole group of, you know, Americans and North Americans, Canadians, and Europeans from all social strata that were ready to receive these kinds of teachings. So they opened up meditation centers, which were as secular as possible, in the sense that these teachers, for example, Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, and Joseph Goldstein, they all started a meditation center outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And they believed that they could, you know, extract Buddhist meditation from the cultural and religious context from which they took it from. Whether or not they succeeded and whether or not that's actually something that could be accomplished, people have been debating since then. But anyway, they decided to set up these temples, these meditation centers, and really mindfulness awareness practices started to be used, you know, throughout North America for all sorts of, you know, medical, psychological, clinical settings. They were used for pain management, addictive recovery, stress reduction, and even as a supplement to psychotherapy. You know what? I think let's take a break. I see people, at least those of us in the audience here, are kind of zoning out. So I'll take that as a sign that people at home are also zoning out. I can't see you, so I imagine you are also doing the same. So let's take a 10-minute break and just refresh, and then we'll come back for another about 20 minutes. Yeah, these record. See, I'm getting tired. It's Thursday. That's another thing. I can't keep blaming it on hybrid. Let's see. So yes, and for example, the Pentagon, the United States, the CIA, they have their own afternoon meditation sessions. A friend of mine who's a Japanese monk was hired recently by Google to give lunchtime meditation sessions. And Google makes a nice hefty donation to his temple in Japan, which he's very happy to receive. But he does lots of these. They believe that it can foster a healthier, you know, collaboration amongst peers. They believe that mindfulness can help people it's all in business speak, optimize the potential of the work, blah, blah, blah. So now, you know, there's this mindfulness has been incorporated into the corporate world. In schools, this is a picture from the UK, but they're using it here in schools in Hong Kong, especially the international and ESF schools where my daughters go. And then so much so that this is now one of the books that is sent home with my kids, Peaceful Piggy Meditation, that teaches meditation to little kids to, you know, help them deal with their emotions. There's even using mindfulness meditation techniques in training with the trauma for soldiers who have actually killed in battle. So there's multiple applications of mindfulness meditation, but there's also the discussion and debate going on at what point does it stop being Buddhist? At what point does training soldiers to deal with the guilt of killing somebody, which goes against Buddhist teachings of nonviolence, you know, at what point, you know, where on the spectrum does things start getting lost? Can you really begin taking meditation out of the religious matrix from which it is embedded? So this, we're not going to get into this discussion, but this is a very lively discussion that's going on even to this day. But what's really helped meditation to come to the forefront of people's awareness is meditation and science. So now people have been able to actually see scientific data which backs up textual claims of what supposedly happens in meditation. So now they're able to hook up people to MRI machines, give them CAT scans, hook them up to all sorts of equipment, which I'll show you here.
Science has contributed to our understanding of the effects of meditation on the brain and body. The research that we've done on meditation in the brain has focused on two major domains that meditation actually affects. One is attention, and the other is emotion. And what we discovered is that the circuits in the brain that are important for regulating both attention and emotion can be transformed by meditation. The 30,000-foot goal is to use the scientific research to understand the nature of suffering and how it can best be alleviated. And Ming Rinpoche is one of our first long-term practitioners.
This will be strapped onto the arm, and we'll get your readings of how
without meditation.
Yes, without meditation.
Usually, when you do this kind of research with either brain electrical imaging,
That guy's
MRI,
hair is pretty pretty horrible. I don't know what that is.
What post-processing means is simply lots of computer algorithms churning at the data after the data is collected, and it often takes many days of computer processing to extract these really weak signals in a lot of noise. It's finding a needle in a haystack.
So he goes on and on. Essentially, I won't play the whole 4 minutes, but essentially he's saying, okay, they're doing this meditation, there's doing these series of experiments where they're giving non-meditators brain scans and studying them for a time. Then they're putting, somewhat casual meditators, and then they have, I just enacted Siri, and then they're doing, professional meditators. So that monk Mingyur Rinpoche is, quote unquote, what they would consider a professional meditator, who's somebody who does, upwards to 20 hours a day in meditation. And they look at their, the scans, and they find some interesting things, such as, which I'll show you after I stop share and reshare something else. Oh, this is so weird. I should take a course on Zoom. So one of the things, so here's another quote unquote professional meditator. So that one, the previous one that we saw in the video was done at University of Wisconsin. This test was done at Mass General, which is also associated with Harvard University. Just reading it here, participants in a 8-week course, mindfulness meditation program, appears to make measurable changes in brain regions associated with memory, sense of self, empathy, and stress. They go on and they quote, although the practice of meditation is associated with a sense of peacefulness and physical relaxation, practitioners have long claimed that meditation also provides cognitive and psychological benefits that persist throughout this day. Continuing on, this study demonstrates that changes in the brain structure may underlie some of these reported improvements, that people are not just feeling better because they are spending time relaxing. In other words, meditation is actually transforming the physical structure of the brain. So there's certain areas of the brain, like the hippocampus here, the brain scans. Hippocampus is a region of the brain that deals with the so-called fight or flight syndrome, the mechanism in the brain, which is a evolutionary byproduct of our, prehistoric days. Simply put, you come out of your cave, you see a lion outside of your cave. What are you going to do? Are you going to fight it, or you're going to run away? That hippocampus is still here inside of our brains. It's hardwired into our brain. So when we come across anything like an exam coming up in 2 weeks, that exam, it takes on the force of a lion in our prehistoric parts of the brain. And the hippocampus is firing, and it's seeing at that exam, and are we going to get freaked out for the next 2 weeks as if it's a lion is stalking us, or are we going to run away? But meditation offers something different. It's a way to analyze that process, and through, continual meditation, like you're going to a gym where you're making muscles and increasing your muscle mass, you're making changes in the brain where the hippocampus becomes stronger and is better able to handle emotions and is able to deal with these fight or flight mechanisms that are firing all the time. So that's one study they found. Another study has to do with prefrontal cortex. So this is the newest part of the brain, evolutionarily speaking, which kind of developed, in the evolutionary span of humanity much later than the hippocampus. And this is responsible for higher thinking, processing faculties such as intuition, empathy, and social awareness. And this gets strengthened through meditative practice. So one of the byproducts of meditation is professional meditators just seem to be happier. Mingyur Rinpoche, this guy up here, this Frenchman, and this guy here, Mingyur Rinpoche, they're actually, they're touted as the happiest people in the world. I've met both of them, and they both are grumpy at times, but overall they are pretty amazing. This guy, I've seen people get into an actual fight with him, and he was able to keep his cool and demeanor, and I was amazed. But he was able to regulate his anger, and he was still bubbling with exuding happiness. And so this part of the brain, prefrontal cortex, has to do with the feelings of empathy. Empathy is the awareness of imagining yourself in somebody else's shoes. So if somebody's hurt, imagining yourself in that person, as that person, and trying to feel what they're feeling. Like, why is that person hurt? And so this helps to develop an overall kind of sense of compassion, love for all humanity. So this is another byproduct of meditation that helps to develop more peaceful feelings, more love for other humans, and just better social awareness. And like I said in the previous slide, the oldest part of the brain, which is the hindbrain, which governs instinctual behavior reflexes driven by fear and anger, fight or flight, that gets more suppressed and controlled through meditative practices. And even you don't even have to hook up your brain. It's fun just to use like an Apple Watch, and I'll get myself all worked up. I'll start thinking about something really angry. Like I did it before class today. So I was getting off the MTR. This is another thing after all these years of living in Hong Kong. The doors open and there's a path, and it says, please allow people to exit the train before you get on. And this woman was just getting, I was like, I'm going. I'm like, and I was like, I just was like, it was pretty cool. I was actually listening to some meditation podcasts before, and I said, what are you doing? Like, where do you want me to go? And she's like, I'm trying to get on the train. I said, I know you are, but I'm trying to get off the train. And it was just like, and then like the anger was boosting up. And I said, okay, I'm going to use the rest of this ride to like check my blood, the thing. And I was able to watch it through different meditation techniques to kind of calm down. And as I saw it, I would open my eyes and the woman was glaring at me, like probably thinking, oh, that crazy Guilo, why is he yelling at me? Like that's what my wife says. They're always thinking, they're like, Tom, you just gotta go with the flow. You just gotta go around them. But anyway, the moral of the story is, using my tracking device on my watch, I was able to watch the blood pressure decrease as I was engaging in this meditation. So, and I do that often to just practice with it and just to see how many breaths per minute I can get. So it is fascinating. Now, the Dalai Lama, who is considered, whether or not he's not, but he's considered the like Pope of Buddhism in modern day the world nowadays. But even he has come out and said, this is all very well and good, but this, this does not lead to enlightenment. This is all very good. This is a very scientific, scientific evidence, and this will lead you to a certain point, but really you also need the ethical foundation for this. If you just focus only on meditation, sure, it will help the brain, it will do with all these kinds of beneficial functions for the brain and the brain matter, but if you really want to go to the next level, you really have to base this meditation in a lifestyle of ethical living and ethical being. And that's very important, which the Buddhists still come out. They'll use science to back up their claims of meditation, but then say in the end, you also need to practice healthy living with regards to love, nonviolence, no stealing, etc., etc. And one other very interesting thing, which this has always fascinated me, this is a practice which comes out of Tantra, Vajrayana, and these monks practice a certain form of meditation called Tummo, which they develop this really intense inner heat. It's like really biological, physiological heat, which they develop in their bodies, so much so that they undergo these practices to see how well they've developed in their practices by, sitting naked in, ice cold weather, and then they'll take sheets, cloth sheets, dip them in ice cold water, put them around themselves and meditate and engage in this tummo, and they dry the sheets. Whereas most of us would start to, tremble from, hypothermia, these monks are able to stay quite, yeah, here it is. If body temperatures continue to drop under these conditions, death can result. But it was not a long time before steam began rising from these sheets as a result of the body heat produced by the monks during meditation. Attendants removed the sheets, then covered the meditators with a second chilled wet wrapping, and they did it again. So there's actually some videos of this, which are amazing. So let's watch. Let's see if I can get this to go here. So yeah, Tibetan Buddhist monks being bioscanned, and this they're engaging in this heat. Oh, did I not share it again? Thanks.
Has been conducting experiments on Buddhist monks from Tibetan monasteries to assess the effects of meditation on the bodies and Taoism. His research has provided a remarkable insight into the ways the mind can alter the functioning of the body.
What we found with respect to their oxygen consumption, in simple meditation, they decreased their metabolism upwards of 64%. And this was the largest decrease in oxygen consumption that was ever recorded in experiments by a simple restful procedure.
Carefully monitoring a form of Dzogchen meditation,
Dzogchen, Tummo.
the yoga of inner healing, Benson came up with even more intriguing results.
What we found initially in Tummo was that monks were able to increase their skin temperature in environments of 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
But that was just the beginning.
Well, what we found in these monks in very cold environments of 40 degrees Fahrenheit, wrapping themselves in wet sheets, these monks astoundingly would increase their temperature enough to get the sheets steaming and dry the sheets. You and I would go into uncontrollable shivering and perhaps even die of too low blood pressure. They were quite comfortable there simply by performing their Tummo meditational heat yoga.
Heat yoga.
And that's how they do it. The monks describe relaxing, focusing on their breathing. They picture air coming in and out as a kind of energy. They visualize it as a flame, a fire coursing through the chest.
Check it out. Look, let's try.
Dr. Benson has shown that anyone who performs performs the initial steps of meditation can have a significant effect on their body. Meditation can help the treatment of stress-related health problems, such as anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, and cardiac irregularities. Can Dr. Benson's evidence about the physical power of Buddhist meditation help us understand what happened to the mummy of Spiti Valley?
This is a documentary about a monk that died in the mummy of Spiti Valley. So yeah, and I won't play it. There's another part of a documentary that talks more about this tummo, this heat yoga. So one more slide and we're all done. This is often also many students will ask me, you know, if I want to start meditating. So this is just a slide I put together. So very basic techniques, you know, how to meditation, New York Times. And it's just some very things. Start slow, 1 minute a day, 1 to 5 minutes to practice slowing. Don't try to set aside 30 minutes to an hour your first time. Otherwise, it's just like going to the gym for the first time, trying to meditate for 45 minutes to an hour. You just won't be able to do it. Yeah, phone apps, books, communities, take classes, do meditation retreats. So these are just some suggestions that usually every semester students will ask me for some initial advice. So that's all I wanted to do today. It's been almost 3 hours. Any questions? No? Okay.